This week, I'm going to discuss the Minneapolis shooting involving an ICE agent. But in figuring out what I wanted to say, I realized that I need to start with some points that I feel are pretty basic, but are also fundamental to understanding how use of force situations should be evaluated. I'm Steve Serbalik, and although I am a panel attorney for ASCOPs in Arizona, this week's video represents my own opinions, not necessarily the opinions of any organization or individual that I may regularly represent. So here's the first principle. Civilians cannot lawfully interfere with law enforcement operations and must obey lawful commands. Deliberately interfering with law enforcement operations or failing to obey lawful commands can lead officers to reasonably believe that an individual may be a threat to officer safety. Credible reports indicate that Miss Renee Nicole Good was intentionally positioning her vehicle in ways that impeded an ongoing federal ICE operation in Minneapolis during a large-scale immigration enforcement action. She was described in some accounts as associated with a group called ICE Watch, a group aimed at observing and disrupting ICE activities. Moments before the incident, her wife had exited the vehicle to film, aware of the ICE presence in the area. Miss Good received orders from ICE agents to stop and get out of the car. She did not stop. She did not get out of the car. Instead, she shifted from reverse to drive and moved forward with agents in close proximity. Law enforcement officers can respond to threats of serious physical injury or death with deadly force. Getting hit by a car can, has, and will cause fatal injuries to officers. Vehicles can accelerate faster than a person can react or move out of the way. Here, the ICE officers didn't know the driver's full identity in that split second, but they did know a vehicle deliberately entered their operation, drove to impede, the driver ignored commands to stop and exit the vehicle, and then shifted gears and moved forward, knowing, or at least at a minimum, recklessly disregarding the position of agents nearby. Law enforcement officers, like everyone else, are subject to perception reaction time limits. The decision to fire a duty weapon necessarily happens before the gun is actually discharged. It's anywhere from about a half a second to a second and a half. This is human biology, the same delay between deciding to act, initiating the action, and then assessing what's happening. No one is exempt, not even highly trained agents. The relevant question is, what was the officer faced with when he decided to use deadly force? Next, investigations should be conducted the same, regardless of political pressure or motivations. Shooting investigations involving federal authorities are always investigated by federal investigators. The vast majority of the time, it's the FBI that conducts the investigation. This is because certain immunities exist for federal officers engaged in federal law enforcement activities. Now, whether this is a good practice or not, it is the standard practice. I can say with certainty that federal investigations are the standard for shootings involving federal agents. Finally, the fifth point. Facts, not feelings, should determine investigative outcomes. The facts of this case are tragic. Miss Renee Nicole Good decided to put herself in the middle of ICE operations. She decided not to follow lawful commands. She decided to put her car in gear and drive forward when there was an officer in front of or in immediate danger from her vehicle. The officer had a reasonable belief at the time that he decided to pull the trigger that he was going to be struck and seriously injured or killed. This investigation is being conducted by the FBI. That's the standard practice for federal agent shootings. Another fact is that the ICE agents on scene were doing their job. They didn't want Miss Good to insert herself into their operation. They didn't want her to disobey lawful commands to stop. They didn't want her to put the car in gear and drive towards them. But they reacted in split seconds to the threat that they reasonably perceived that she created. So if we can agree on these 5 basic fundamental issues about law enforcement actions: 1, no interference with operations and obedience to lawful commands. 2, deadly force is justified against imminent serious injury or death threats. 3, human perception reaction time limits apply to everyone. 4, investigations should be impartial, fact-based, and conducted the same way regardless of politics. And 5, facts not feelings should determine investigative outcomes, then we can have a reasonable discussion about uses of force, investigations, policies, laws, and best practices. But if we can't agree on these basic principles, then a productive discussion just doesn't seem possible. So whether you support law enforcement or not, officers are people doing a job with the right and responsibility to go home to their families at the end of their shifts. Additionally, tens of thousands of peaceful protesters make their positions known in a manner that's consistent with the U.S. Constitution. Peaceful protesters also have the right to go home safely to their families, but protests cannot ever be lawful, nor should they be tolerated or celebrated if they include actions that create this risk of serious injury or death for law enforcement. I hope discussions about this incident focus on avoiding similar situations, primarily by encouraging those who disagree with ICE, with the president, or with law enforcement in general to peacefully protest, but not to interfere with or, God forbid, threaten officers with deadly force. I represent police officers for a living, so I think about these issues quite a lot. But if you think that I'm missing something and are interested in respectful dialogue, please provide your comment down below. I read every one of these comments. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It really helps the videos be seen by more people. Be on the lookout for new videos. They come out every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Arizona time. I'm Steve Cerbalik. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there.